We're now moving to our fourth day. This morning is a session that we have on employment and decent work with our colleagues from Unit E2, Beata Plonka. This afternoon, we'll have a session on social protection. So these are the two sessions of the day. Obviously, those of you joining, you have probably heard quite a little bit about what E2 does and all of the focus on employment decent work and all of the specific challenges with labor market and their reforms, issues about creating employment, issues about informal economy and informal workers, issues with marginalized and vulnerable groups, and inserting them in the value chain, giving them a voice, ensuring that dialogue, post-dialogue, and policy reform works for them. So quite a number of different challenges, in addition to the creation of capacity through TVET for that, creating a labor force that responds to market needs and that can evolve with these market needs. So quite a big and ambitious agenda for your unit and for covering this session this morning. Not to waste any time, because we have three speakers today that we'll introduce in a minute. I'd like to give the floor to Mathilde Cournu from Unit G4 to remind us our context.
Thank you very much, Jérôme. And again, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. So as you may know, my name is Mathilde Cournu from Unit G4, so in charge of organizing this Inequality Week with the great help of other thematic units, such as Unit E2, so in charge of employment, decent and private sector, etc. So I would like to wish you a good session. And as you may know, so this session is part of the Inequality Week, this 5-day seminar, going until tomorrow, and tomorrow will be our last day. It will be a great opportunity for you, I'm sure, to expand your knowledge on inequalities and to know more about our tools and also what other units are doing related to inequality. So thank you so much and wish you a good session.
And tomorrow we have the inequality marker.
Exactly. With
Christian Morabito and Philippe Latrèche. So
exactly.
Please stay with us.
Thank you so much.
Beata, do you want to introduce our guest speakers that will be coming in, or should we just give them the names so that everyone knows? This morning, after Beata introduces from E2 the perspective that we have on employment creation and decent work promotion, we'll be hearing from experiences by Gear. And again, forgot the name of the acronym, but it's about gender, and promoting decent work for women, with an example in Bangladesh, supporting by the EU and the IFC. From the World Bank Group, we'll hear from Marek Mulder, the Director of Market Development at Triple Jump, supported by the EU and the Dutch Good Growth Fund, and other examples on how we can create business opportunities and access to finance. And then we'll hear from Diego Borrero Magana on the Investment Climate Reform Facility, the ICR, and his work in Rwanda and study at Kigali's Informal Economy and Action Plan to improve business environment and resilience of informal operators. So a little bit of a panel to then spur a discussion during our Q&A session. So as we go through, you'll see that you have questions coming up. Please don't hesitate to post your questions. We'll show you again the link in your chat, but the link will take you here and you'll be able to post questions on the presentation. And if you like the questions, you can click on like so that you can let us know what you want to discuss about with us during the Q&A session. On this, I will let you, Beata, start running your presentation and take over.
Thank you very much, Jérôme and Mathilde. So you already briefly introduced, presented the unit INTPA E2. That's true that our unit covers a lot of topics. I put a title on this presentation because I want the following one: employment creation and decent work promotion. as a way to reduce socio-economic inequalities, because I wanted to focus on those two areas, but we work on many other also areas, including vocational education and training. Maybe I will not speak a lot about this, but it's important maybe through question and answers, and we can also touch upon this topic. But also I put in this title slide the name, in fact, of the message of our directorate. It's to build an economy that works for people. And this is, I think, very much linked to the topic today of reduction of inequalities, because it's something overarching in our work, that we want to influence the economic development of partner countries in a way that it's beneficial for people, not for GDP, but for people, really. And I think it's a very good message. So we in E2, in fact, we were rather focusing on the concept of decent work, and now with the new focus on inequality, myself and I invited other colleagues from the unit to reflect on to what extent and how we also contribute to inequality reduction in our thematic area. And this presentation is in fact a result of this reflection. Maybe we realized that in fact we do not have a kind of explicit strategy written somewhere, but in fact implicitly, yes, I think with our action we already do contribute to a reduction of socioeconomic inequalities, but we certainly may do more and better. So it's a kind of also a result of this reflection, but also we are open to other questions, your questions from the audience, but also ideas, suggestions. What could we do in addition better in order really to contribute to reduction of socioeconomic inequalities more? So why, maybe the first point of our reflection was why great. Why addressing inequality matters for job creation? Because the general idea would be that's enough to focus on job creation, and the market, the free market, will do the rest. Yes. And the wealth created through employment, through jobs, will trickle down naturally to everybody. But we know all that it's not the case. And even if we work on a job creation, we should also focus on the quality of the jobs that are created, but also on other aspects in order these jobs help people to be brought out of poverty and to reduce inequality. And if we do not really focus on several factors, the inequalities will persist and even deepen, even if we manage to create jobs. Of course, the private sector creates jobs. No technical and vocational education, no, let's say, other aspects. It's the private sector. So we should support private sector, because this is the main employer. But how? So we discussed that in fact, if businesses led by vulnerable groups are not well organized, they will not be represented in private-public dialogue, or in a policy dialogue at country level, in private-public dialogue, or in social dialogue. And so their voice will not be heard. Their interest will not be satisfied. And in fact, only consolidated businesses, big businesses, formal businesses, will in fact benefit from the support to private sector development. and not the micro businesses and small businesses. So we cooperate very much with the International Labour Organization, the organization that focuses on those aspects of quality of jobs on the labor market. And according to ILO, it is important really to focus on micro, small and medium-sized enterprises, because they are responsible for more than 2/3 of all jobs worldwide. And they also account for the majority of new jobs created. So when we support private sector, we should try to really do it in a way that micro businesses, small businesses are the first one to benefit from this support in order to help them to thrive and to create jobs. It means also that we should include in the support to private sector the informal businesses that are the majority of the businesses in developing world. And how we do it? We should strengthen the organizations of employers of informal businesses in order for them to be heard, but also to be capable, able to understand what are their needs, what is their situation, and to be able to participate in the dialogue with the government, in the dialogue with other businesses, bigger businesses, so in the private-public dialogue, but also in the social dialogue, then including also the workers. And only if we help those businesses, those small, micro, informal businesses, if we focus on them, we will be able to develop reforms or the investment climate in a way that it's inclusive, that includes the interests of those groups, and then we may this way contribute to the reduction of inequalities. This is the aspect of job creation. Another important aspect that we work on in our unit is the promotion of decent work. Decent work is a concept that we use, very much in our policy documents in the EU. It was developed by the International Labour Organization. It's a concept that is based on 4 pillars. Those pillars are first, employment, so really creation of jobs through different policies. The second is the labor rights. And the third pillar is social dialogue. And the last 4th pillar is social protection. So here I would like to very much focus on this aspect of social dialogue. If there is a lack of social dialogue, so no dialogue between employers, workers, organizations, and the government, we very often we have really poor working conditions and a lot of cases of violation of labor rights. And so I insisted when for the job creation, I insisted on this issue of involving businesses, especially not forgetting the weakest businesses, the informal, micro and small business in the dialogue, in the policy dialogue. Here in this in the context of decent work promotion, I wanted to highlight the importance of social dialogue that includes businesses, governments, but also workers represented through trade unions. And trade unions very often face huge difficulties to be registered in countries, to freely pursue their activities. But in fact, the existence and free operations activities of trade unions is one of the most important, is one of the fundamental labor right. It's one of the most important international labor standard, the freedom of association. And if a social dialogues works well, if there are trade unions that really represent well workers' rights, they can already by their action to improve working conditions, to really identify the problems in this area and push for progress, for improvement. But also they are very helpful in identify cases of labor rights violations, among them the worst ones relating to child labor or forced labor and other kinds of discrimination. And also regarding these poor working conditions, I wanted to highlight that in fact we consider that employment is the key driver for getting people out of poverty, but unfortunately, it not happens always. It's not it's an automatic outcome. Again, according to some latest ILO estimates, 79% of all people employed in the world did not live in poverty in 2018. So before COVID, of course, COVID exacerbated the problems. So which is a good, on the global average, which is a good news that almost 80% of people who are working, who are employed, are not poor. Unfortunately, but of course, so it proves that employment is a good driver out of poverty. But still 20% were still poor, or moderately poor, or extremely poor. So this is millions of people, 20%. So we should work in a way that when the people are employed, the employment is of enough good quality in order to get them out of poverty. The situation as far as this working poor is, of course, different between regions. And the situation remains most alarming in Africa, where the share of working poor was close to 33%. So meaning that almost 1/3 of all workers in Africa lived in extreme poverty. So they were working, but not earning enough, and so being still poor. Here there is a concept of promoting living income and living wages. So the wages, the income that helps the people to really get out of poverty. This is not yet a labor standard. It's not even yet discussed to be a labor standard. But we already, with some EU member states, start to discussing the issue how we, beyond this concept of decent work, we could also start promoting really this concept of living income. So really the quality of jobs, not only as far as labor standards are concerned, but also the income, the wages. Yes, let me. What is then our strategy? How we once we defined that it's important for us to focus on this, what is our strategy in E2? What we do in practice? So here are several, let's say, building blocks of our strategy. To this implicit strategy that we use through our activities, through our thematic area. Job creation, and especially good quality jobs creation, is our overarching objective, because, as I said, we believe that employment is the main driver out of poverty, however, not automatic. we have several approaches. The beneficiary approach. So we really, I would like to insist on this adjective of inclusive access to finance, inclusive business environment, inclusive aid for trade. It's the inclusivity, it means including or focusing, mainly targeting our actions on groups that are socially, economically, and politically disadvantaged. Many often there are women, young people, but not always and not everywhere. So this group should be defined for each country. Which group has really difficulty to access the labor market, to access the education or vocational education, to access the finance in order to set up a business. Which kind of businesses have difficulty to benefit from private sector support activities that we offer in developing countries. So in this area, so this in this thematic in this beneficiary approach, we, for example, very often use this concept of women economic empowerment as far as the women group is concerned. We focus very much also on youth. Other important group very often that has difficulties are informal workers or informal economy agents, because informal, it means that those people run their own informal businesses. People with disability also face particular difficulties. Even a very important group are migrant workers. There are many of them in several parts of the world, and they are very much exposed to risks of labor rights violations. For example, they are one of the main group at risk of forced labor. So this is this beneficiary approach. Another approach is geographic approach. So we, of course, focus on fragile states, least developed countries, usually where, for example, if we promote the private sector or investment markets, usually the banks don't want to invest in those countries. That's why with our activities we want to provide additional guarantees, additional support to those investors, to the banks, the development banks, in order to go to those specific geographic areas where usually they don't go. And of course, another the third one is our thematic approach, and here you can see the building blocks of this our strategy. So an important building block is this transition from informal to formal economy. When businesses manage to become formal, it means that they grow, they thrive, and they can offer better working conditions and better also income, because they can also benefit more easily from support. They can have an easier access to finance in order to develop. Another important building block of our thematic approach is this inclusive business environment reform or inclusive investment climate. So inclusive, as I was mentioning at the beginning, so really including this micro, small, informal business, their opinion, their voice, what they need to build this environment reform, this business environment reform in a way that it includes, it's also beneficial for those specific businesses. Another is inclusive access to finance for businesses. As I mentioned, usually banks don't want to lend money to micro, informal businesses, to cooperatives. And so we want with this, with our actions, to create conditions encouraging the financial institutions to really propose financial services to to specific countries, but also to specific business groups in those countries. Also, inclusive aid for trade. We have a project Aid for Trade for the countries where we have a lot of trade between the EU and those countries. There are also programs Aid for Trade to support the businesses, and also our focus is on the small businesses, on those, so to help them to benefit of these opportunities. And also I wanted to mention this opportunity-driven VET. This is a new concept that we try to develop. Vocational VET, it's vocational education and training. So we see a lot of interest from EU delegations on VET, but I wanted to highlight that VET does not create jobs. VET should go after. That's why we speak about opportunity-driven VET. So where there are opportunities, where some sectors, business sectors, industrial sectors develop, then we should accompany this development, those opportunities with VET actions, because VET itself, vocational education itself, is not enough. And last point that also will be more and more important is the responsible business conduct, is the due diligence, the upcoming legislation on due diligence, and so we through this approach that will be mandatory for European businesses to apply due diligence in the value chain. So through all the value chains with all the suppliers, and they will be responsible for respecting labor rights by those suppliers, in fact. So this will be a big change. We hope this will be a big lever. It of course, there are still a lot of questions, and this is still under the legislative process. So the directive was not yet adopted, but hopefully will be this year. And then so we will be very much working on this concept of responsible business conduct, how to involve private sector in encourage it, mobilize it to a better inclusion of and respect for labor rights. And I wanted to provide you several examples of projects that we that will develop. I don't know how many time I have still. What, 5 minutes maybe?
3 to 5.
3 to 5. So here we have this Team Europe initiative, investing in young businesses in Africa. So here we pull together all EU member states that are present in Africa in order to develop further investment programs focused on young businesses in Africa, run by young people, but also that are young, that were created recently. And our focus is also with this TI on businesses run by women. Then another is this EFSD Carib Equity. So it was under the EFSD micro, small and medium-sized enterprises window, where we want to build a local ecosystem of investment funds focusing on investing in small early stage businesses and mobilize local investment in the Caribbean region. The Caribbean region, which is not the focus of normally of development financial institutions, because there are small countries, small islands. So we want to mobilize the development of local ecosystem for investment funding, focusing on some target groups like disadvantaged, poor, vulnerable women, and also on some essential services, access to water and sanitation, connectivity, energy, housing, etc. We have a TPSD facility. So TPSD, it means trade, private sector development and employability. So it's our staff in partner countries and our staff in delegations and headquarters can benefit from this facility to support SMEs and in fragile states in the areas such as trade, access to finance, public-private dialogue, green economy, women economic empowerment. Also, another facility is the ICR, and Diego is the representative of this facility, Investment Climate Reform. Is focused on women, but also on informality, on social entrepreneurship, on inclusive business models. So we will present today. Diego will present one example of action focused on informality in Kigali, in Rwanda. Here are several examples of projects where we focus on the quality of jobs. Better Work is the ILO big flagship project on the textile sector, where we work with several other donors, because it's a multi-donor initiative on improving working conditions, and especially for women, but not only, for all workers in the textile sector. And Nabila, the guest speaker, will present a concrete example of gender equality and return program, a special training for women working in this textile industry. Trade for Decent Work, it may be interesting. It's not an INTPA project, it's a trade project, but we, INTPA, contributed. And it really focuses on countries where we have GSP schemes or free trade agreements, in order to help those countries to properly, efficiently apply the international labor standards. Through this project, we can see how the trade instruments like free trade agreements and GSP can be a lever in the improvement of working conditions. The Sustainable Supply Chains to Build Forward Better is, for example, an initiative that was financed by DG Employment. They selected several sectors in different countries: textile in Madagascar, for example, electronic sector in Vietnam, and they supported the application of labor standards in those industries, in those sectors, especially taking into consideration the challenges caused by COVID-19. And for both, in Trade for Decent Work, and even the three examples, Better Work, Trade for Decent Work, and the third one, Sustainable Supply Chains to Build Forward Better, the focus on strengthening, enhancing social dialogue was very much present in these projects, because we think really that social dialogue is a really key enabler for improving working conditions. I wanted to also mention the Socio Plus, which is our thematic technical assistance facility, focusing on support to public institutions from partner countries in the areas of employment and social protection. So partner countries, public institutions, governments, but not only, also the social partners can submit requests to Socio in order to benefit from peer support from European experts in those areas. And we have already more than 200 actions developed thanks to Socio. And maybe I will stop here. During maybe this question and answer session, I can a little bit speak about this new concept that we we recently read. I wanted to share with you this interesting article about the missing jobs crisis in Africa, but I leave it maybe for after the discussion. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Beata. It was extremely interesting and a complete overview of what you promote in your unit. Should we, without waiting, introduce our guest speakers, Nabira Rahman from GEAR, with IFC and Better Work. Nabira, are you able
Yes.
to take the floor?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. I will share my screen and put the presentation on.
We see it. You just have to switch to diaporama and we're good. Excellent. Thank you.
No, we are back to. Oh, yes, that's good.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right, thank you again for the opportunity. I'm Nabira Rahman from IFC. On behalf of our team, it is a great honor to be presenting the Gender Equality and Returns Program during this Inequality Week. So the GEAR program, in short, we call it GEAR, is addressing the inequalities that exist in the workplace through promoting women into leadership roles through technical and soft skills trainings. So GEAR is a supervisory skills training program with two goals. It is, first of all, trying to reduce the gender inequalities in the leadership roles. So when we look at the workforce, majority of workforce, especially in the context of Bangladesh, the ready-made garment sector consists of women. For example, when we look at line operators, 80% of line operators who are working on the sewing machines are women. But when we look at supervisory roles, which is a position that is just above that of operators, less than 5% consist of women. So there is a huge gender imbalance. And through this program, we are trying to reduce those inequalities, imbalances, and also improve operational performance through increased productivity, reduced absenteeism, and other benefits. I'm going to show a video which shows how trying to address these issues in the workplace also have positive impacts in the personal lives of these women, and how their family members can also benefit from this.
Can you switch to full screen?
Yes.
Yep. That's it.
যখন আমার বাবা আমাদেরকে নিয়ে গল্প করতো যে আমার দাদুর মতো আমি অনেক বড় আইনজীবী হব, বলতো যে তুমি দেশ পরিচালনার কাজ করবে, অনেক বড় হতে হবে। বাবা যখন মারা গেল, বড় ভাইয়েরা বললো যে তোমার আর পড়ালেখা করার দরকার নেই, আমরা বিয়ে দিয়ে দেবো। তখন এই স্বপ্নগুলো মানে নিভে যাচ্ছিল, মনে হচ্ছিল চতুর্দিকে অন্ধকার। তখন আমি আমার মায়ের সাথে শেয়ার করে আমি চাকরির জন্য বাইরে আসি। ওনারা আমাকে বলছে যে তুমি তো কোয়ালিটিতে জব করো, তা আমরা প্রোডাকশনে ঝুমি সুপারভাইজার ট্রেনিং করাবো। আমি সকালে এসে ফার্স্ট টাইমে আগে আমার লাইনটা ঘুরে দেখি যে আমার লাইনটা ঠিক আছে কিনা, কোথাও কোনো প্রবলেম আছে কিনা। তো তিনটা চেঞ্জ হয়ে গেছে। এই মানুষগুলোর ভালো মন্দ, এই মানুষগুলোর হচ্ছে ডিসিপ্লিন, আমার কোম্পানির হচ্ছে নিয়ম কানুন, সবকিছু আমাকে দেখতে হবে। তো মেয়েকে সহজে ওয়ার্কাররা সেটা করতে পারতেছে। শুধু নিজে ভালো থাকবে এমনটা নয়, যে নিজে ভালো থাকবো, আমার সমাজ ভালো থাকবে, আমার পাশের লোকগুলো ভালো থাকবে। পাশাপাশি আমার একটা ছেলে আছে, আমি এখন আমার ছেলেকে নিয়ে আরো একটু বড় স্বপ্ন দেখতেছি। এই জিনিসগুলো মনে করেন আজকে সুপারভাইজার এসে, কালকে হয়তো 2 বছর পরে লাইন চিফ থেকে অফিসার। যে এখন মনে হয় যে আমার যে স্বপ্নগুলো থেমে গিয়েছিল, আমি এই স্বপ্নগুলো আবার দেখতে শুরু করেছি।
Just a second. I'm trying to put the screen. Yeah.
Excellent.
Cool. So this is just one of the examples. Thanks again to all the partners we're working with. So this is an IFC ILO-led initiative implemented through the Project Work program, and our donor partners, mainly EU, that's funding the Bangladesh and Sri Lanka programs. So there are several positive impacts that we have seen, and how we are achieving this is really through a series of interventions. For example, yeah, so the GEAR approach consists of working with the trainees as well as the managers. So there are engagement sessions with the management, there are joint engagement sessions between managers and trainees. But the core of the program consists of training sessions, technical training, and leadership soft skills training for the women, as well as on-the-job training, so that they have the skills that are required to progress into supervisory positions. So it started as a pilot in Bangladesh in 2016 with 28 factories, based on its success in terms of increasing the share of women in supervisory roles, in terms of successfully being able to increase line efficiency in lines led by these female supervisors. It has been scaled up, and it was adapted in Vietnam. It's currently being adapted in Sri Lanka. So these are some of the results in the next slide that we will show based on the programs in Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Sri Lanka is still ongoing. So we'll hopefully have results we'll be able to show results in the future. So this is like one of the photos from the very first cohort of women who received the training. I wish you could also see like the energy, and when they first come together in the room from all the different participating factories, sometimes even they can't believe that, okay, there is so much happening and women can be in these higher level positions in different factories. So there are factories that benefit from investment in training through these programs, and then also the trainers and the workers. So from the factory side, it is an increase in the share of female supervisors, increase in productivity, decrease in absenteeism, decrease in defect rates, and decrease in turnover. And these are some of our findings from the impact assessment that we have done in the past. And in terms of trainee and worker benefits, we have seen that the percentage of women who are promoted, on average in Bangladesh, they have received like 40% higher take-home pay based on their previous position before they joined the program. So this higher income obviously translates into several ways, like purchase of assets, better education for their children, better bargaining power at home, higher respect in their community, in their families, besides having more respect in the workplace, and a better contribution towards improving working conditions for other workers as well. So in Bangladesh, we have done it in 78 factories, but it's more than 80 cohorts, because there were multiple factories that enrolled more than one cohort. So through 80 cohorts, we have trained 627 women, and 65% of them were offered promotions to supervisory roles. And the numbers for Vietnam were also there till date. In 34 factories, GEAR was piloted and then scaled up, with training being provided to 148 female operators, 55% of whom have been promoted to supervisory roles. And the results that factories are most excited about is the efficiency gains. So it's between like 5% to 8%. There are some factories where we see up to like 10-15% increase in productivity and efficiency as a result of these GEAR trained supervisors. And there are several other benefits too, but these were the key ones that I wanted to share. But in general, we are also now looking at, okay, factories have these benefits, workers have these benefits, like the trainees have these benefits, but how does it translate to the other workers as well. So we are conducting another impact assessment, which is ongoing, and these are just the preliminary results, but I still wanted to show that like a higher percentage of trainee supervisors report that they are more likely to give extra support to the less skilled operators who are working under their supervision. And this is in comparison to the typical supervisors, and by typical we mean that we selected a comparison group from the factories, and the comparison groups are basically untrained supervisors who haven't gone through the GEAR or another training, but who have similar years and levels of experience. And similarly, trained supervisors also are more likely to use praise to motivate operators. And the questions were also asked to the operators who are working with them. So the operators who are working under the trainee supervisors and operators who are also working under the typical comparison supervisors. And also in the use of shouting or abusive language to motivate operators. So on average, trainee supervisors reported they are much less likely to resort to shouting or the use of abusive language to motivate others, and responses of line operators also confirmed this finding. Another example too is involving sewing machine operators in solving problems online. Why I'm sharing these examples is because, you know, these are examples of the micro inequalities, maybe on a day-to-day basis, which actually contribute and feed into the larger statistics that we see on inequality, whether it's at the household level or in the workplace. So through the GEAR program, we are seeing, and now this impact assessment is confirming that when we work on investing in training men and women, we see these positive impacts, which then eventually contributes into improving the overall picture, leading to better lives, better workplace, basically better win-win situation for everyone. And then we also looked at, some questions in the surveys were also related to the household. So on average, GEAR trainees are less likely to make decisions alone on large asset purchases, such as land and household goods. So is that a good thing, a bad thing? We are in the process of understanding, but we have several stories. For example, this one where we gathered the stories. We asked the question, how has your life changed, improved or gotten worse? Like, how has it changed? So while there are stories of difficulties, there are also several stories of success. For example, this person, Nurjahan Akhtar, from one of the Levi supplier factory, her income increased from 10,500 to 19,000. And with the salary bump, she was able to purchase a truck along with her husband, which they now rent out. And so we had somebody who, collected their story, and we also got some of the photos. And we also have stories of several trainees who are making other asset purchases, like land ownership, investing in education, and all that. And there's some anecdotes from the managers to how it's also improving the workplace. And with that, I'm actually on one of my final slides. So based on the successes of the GEAR program, it is now being adapted to another industry as well, to an agribusiness. And one of my colleagues who's in this program as well, she's leading this initiative. So these pictures are from United Exports, a blueberry farm in South Africa, and the pilot is ongoing. So from these stories, we see that this is a reality. Inequalities exist for. Mostly we see in our experience among women. And sometimes it really is, the power of one. I don't know if you'll believe it, but 20% of the factories enrolled in the GEAR program had no female supervisors, had 0 female supervisors at the start of the program. And sometimes it really takes that one female supervisor or 2 female supervisors to start working. And through that example, others come forward. It starts creating that mind change, that the mind shift, like shifting the the status quo and bringing about systemic changes so that there is a more sustainability in addressing these inequalities and moving towards a better future. So so that was actually all from my side. I tried to keep it within 15 minutes. I don't know if I'm done too early. So I don't know if we'll have questions later. So if you would like me to elaborate more, then please feel free to ask. Thank you very much.
A great thank you to you, Nabira. It's very interesting and a very beautiful set of examples and success stories. Indeed, we'll have questions. So just to remind everyone in the chat, you can go to the links that were given to you that would give you access to the employment and decent work sessions online. I see there's already questions coming up, so we'll have a look at that a bit later. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Maybe I would like to give the floor now to Mr. Manik Mulder from Triple Jump, that is offering the view of another approach to supporting decent work and employment through financial instruments in good growth. Manik, can you take the floor?
Yes, I can. Let me try to show the presentation. Do you see it on screen?
Coming up. That's it.
Yeah.
Good.
Thanks, Jerome, for your kind introduction, and thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Actually, I go a bit broader than just pure decent work. I just wanted to allude more on the topic of financial and inequality, but jobs is a very important component of that. Actually, maybe to tell a bit more about myself. So I am in charge of what we call market development within Triple Jump. Triple Jump itself is an impact investment manager. Impact investment management is a form of investing with the very explicit objective to create a social objective, or to achieve a social objective, and on top of that, create a financial objective. I think that's something to add. What I wanted to talk you through is actually this presentation, so quickly about us, like who we are and what is our approach, what do we do, and I understand that most of the participants have a background in development cooperation. Actually, I started also working in development cooperation and made the shift 15 years ago to the finance realm. And I realized there's actually a lot of similarities between the two, but there's also some fundamental differences, and particularly the use of terminology. So I've tried to keep it simple, but if there's anything that's unclear, please feel free to ask. And after elaborating shortly on Triple Jump, I'll zoom into the topic of finance and inequality and how we try to operationalize that and actually contribute to fighting inequality through investing. And then at last, I would like to share some additional considerations that might be relevant for policymakers like you. Well, start with Triple Jump. Triple Jump itself was established in 2006. Actually, it was a spin-off from Oxfam Novib, a Dutch NGO. And since then, it has grown to what we call a professional investment manager, professional in the sense that we're regulated by the Dutch Authority for Financial Markets. We manage more than 1 billion, we have grown our staff. We operate in more than 50 countries. We started back in the day with pure microfinance. You might be familiar with it. Actually, microfinance later was nicknamed more financial inclusion. But actually, we have expanded beyond. We're looking into SME finance. We're looking into renewable energy finance, climate and nature finance. As long as it contributes to our mission. We are an impact-driven organization, so to say. Although we're structured as a business, but we try to achieve good. And on the right side of the screen, you see our vision and your mission. And it's our vision that through the investing in entrepreneurship, we unlock the power of entrepreneurship to really fight some of the global challenges. And actually, inequality is part of our vision of the challenges that we try to fight. Yeah, I think that's it for Triple Jump. Just go to the next. How we work is that we create funds and mandates. There's some technical differences between the two, but I will not bother you with it. And we do that with a broad range of partners. That's actually what makes this work so exciting. So we work still a lot with NGOs, really in the development realm, but we also work with banks and we work with institutional investors. And actually trying to cross the spectrum, this is one of the challenges that we try to achieve. And so what makes us different than development cooperation is that we do aim for a financial return. And with the more development-oriented mandates, it's often just pure revolving, making sure that we earn back our management fee, get the money back, and compensate for inflation, which nowadays is quite a challenge, I can tell you. But preferably, and that's where we work towards, is that we can work towards more commercial returns. And why do we want to do that? Not to make money, but to be able to actually scale up and attract other type of investors. Let me quickly jump in. Here you see on the screen on the left side, actually all the funds we manage. You already mentioned the Dutch Good Growth Fund, which is a fund that was commissioned by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs and is particularly aimed at improving access to so-called missing middle companies. So small and medium enterprises with the objective to create jobs. And so that is, I think, one that is quite interesting for the topic of discussion. Quickly on this one. So each of the mandates has its own theory of change and logic. And here we group them actually into three main areas: financial inclusion, SME finance, and energy access. And actually inequality is cross-cutting. It goes through those topics. And let me quickly then jump to that part of the presentation. Actually, we have approached inequality through an adjacent concept, which is inclusive growth. It actually pairs inequality to economic growth. And we have been operationalizing that in two manners. One is that we do not want to do harm. So all our deals that we do, we screen for not increasing inequality, not directly, sometimes indirectly. It's pretty hard to filter that out. But more than that, actually, we try to do good by really reaching out to target groups that are marginalized or have lesser access to finance or access to jobs. We have four basic lenses there. First is the target groups, it's that one, well, through our financial inclusion arm, we particularly reach out to the base of the pyramid. So people that really have lower levels of income and poorer livelihoods. Then also through Dutch Good Growth Fund, particularly we reach out specifically to young entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in fragile states. Then I think what that's most close to the topic of today is that we try to contribute to inclusive employment. And we do that actually, well, first we contribute to employment. So we have a very thorough system of monitoring job growth and the jobs that we support. But as part of the due diligence, we really also look at the quality of the job. So it's not just any job, but that it's jobs that need to meet minimum thresholds. And there we particularly started to look in promoting jobs, not only for highly educated men in cities, but particularly also for low-skilled workers in rural areas. And then actually we look at yet another lens is that the businesses that we support, ideally, they also create services that are geared towards marginalized groups or people that are excluded in another way from the socio-economic growth process. To give you an example, we've invested in Novastar, which is a venture capital fund that's based in Kenya, operating from Kenya, and they've invested in Synergy, which is a company that rolls out sanitation solutions in slum areas. And lastly, we we try to make sure that we also go geographically to places where others don't go, that are particularly operating in rural territories and also in sectors that are less easy to find. Agriculture is one that is very tough. You operate in rural territories with a lower density than the urban cities. It means that for financial institutions, your transaction costs go up because you have to relate to these different clients, and that is more costly. And at the same time, we introduce something that's called a systemic risk. If there's one client that fails, then probably the whole value chain has a problem. Anyway, so we try to find solutions also to cope with that. I think in many conversations, we focus a lot on banks, actually, when we talk about inclusiveness, and we want to have the banks to be inclusive. But I think it's our thesis, and I think also we have evidence for that banks are a part of the solution, but also part of the problem. And if you really want to build inclusivity, you need to build a much more inclusive and diversified financial ecosystem. So in addition to banks, you need to have private equity, venture capital, microfinance institution, leasing companies, the whole shebang. And if once you establish that, then you can actually serve all segments of society. Let me quickly jump into a couple of examples. This is ACTB. It's being financed through one of the funds that I overlook. It's a seed capital fund. With that, we can really step in early and take high risk. This is an initiative in Sierra Leone, working in a very difficult context. It's operating communities where others don't come. And it's not only working with micro entrepreneurs, but also particularly with SME entrepreneurs. And that is more interesting also from the perspective of job generation. It does not only offer finance, actually it does more. It has worked with the communities also to cope with the crisis around first Ebola and subsequently COVID-19 through awareness campaigns, educational campaigns. They are often one of the few institutions or the only institution present in the community. And they also have been providing business development services, training, so to say, to particularly women entrepreneurs to help them actually improve their business operations. Actually, on our website, there's a case study that we just launched, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. So you can have a look if you're interested. Yet another one, Amam Ventures. This is a very different animal. This is really a fund that invests in businesses. But what makes it so cool is that it's led by two women, and it only invests in women enterprises. And it doesn't do that just like a typical fund, but it also uses instruments that much better resonate with their target group. They use mezzanine finance, which is some sort of interesting way to structure your deals. And you don't need to ask a lot of collateral. And a lot of cases, women have more difficult access to collateral than men. And so through this instrument, actually, they can much easier finance women businesses. The second is that they also provide business development services, because you also see that a lot of the women entrepreneurs have less access to the educational system and are less formally educated. So actually on the side, they can also provide training and networking events on the whole shebang. Another example, we're staying in the MENA region. This one is actually in Palestine territories. And nobody thought that this would actually be feasible. This is a fund that we started to support in 2017. This is a venture capital fund, a more traditional venture capital fund, but investing in young enterprises of young entrepreneurs in Palestine territories. And it is actually quite successful. They're currently raising their successor fund, and that's how funds operate. You start small, and the first fund is very difficult to raise and to implement. But if it works, then you can start raising a larger fund, and your outreach to companies gets bigger, and your impact gets bigger. The second fund is called very creatively Ipticar 2. But it seems quite successful, and there's a lot of interest. And that is also one of the things that we try to promote, is through the seed capital investments, build a track record, build more confidence, credibility of the entrepreneurs that lead this initiative so they get access to finance from more traditional investors. RCMR Mali, this is more traditional microfinance institution. Still, it's also serving SME, but what makes this one special, it's operating in Mali. It is operating for 95% in the rural territories, and it is also providing this agri finance. So from an investor perspective, it's like almost 2 red flags, but they managed to do so. And how come that they can do this? I think it's because they are supported also by the Vision Fund. They're supported by players like us who can stay in for the long run, who have patient capital, and who don't run away with the first crisis. Yeah, so that was just a couple of examples. I'm not sure how I'm in time. I just have a couple of last considerations. If it still works, then I think I just gave you the gospel that finance is so good for inequality, but it's not always like that. I mean, finance also has a lot of ugly faces. And what we've encountered is that there can be trade-offs also in terms of policy objectives. When you want to achieve something, then you cannot achieve the other thing. And I wanted to give you quickly 3 examples. One in Ethiopia. Actually, we had an external evaluator looking at our activities, and we had been contributing to building the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Ethiopia. He said, hey, guys, you have only been focusing on the city. That is not very inclusive. Why don't you go to rural areas? And there is an issue. If you really want to support entrepreneurial ecosystems, you typically focus on the places where infrastructure meets markets, meets finance, meets talents. And that is in the city context. So if you want to nurture that, then you have to accept that you will not go and operate in the middle of nowhere. There's other solutions to operate in the middle of nowhere. And that brings me to the second situation where we worked on and still are working on youth finance. Actually, we launched a venture capital for youth strategy. So we're really promoting this instrument. It's a high growth company. It's also relatively well-educated young entrepreneurs that can seize these opportunities and that are supported. So we have been positive, like how can we make it more inclusive? So we went back to the full database, and actually we discovered that particularly some a bit more traditional microfinance institutions that are currently digitizing also have very good outreach to young entrepreneurs. They are less sexy, probably less catalytic in our ability to find follow-up funding, but they're as impactful. So a last example is a very cool company that we supported in Zambia. It was providing equipment into the veins of rural Zambia to entrepreneurs, fridges, solar equipment, these kind of things. And they were providing the equipment, they're providing the finance, they were procuring themselves in China. It was a beautiful model, but extremely stretched with a very thin financial margin. And then came COVID, and then came actually a devaluation of the kwacha, the local currency, and they went bankrupt. So you have to accept that if you really operate in the trenches, that you have to take sometimes higher risk, and that actually can have repercussions on the revolvingness of what you do. Anyway, it's just 3 examples. So concluding, I would say finance and inequality, it's a beautiful marriage. You can achieve a lot as long as you're very precise about which target group you want to reach. If you want to work with young entrepreneurs, fine, but rural area, urban, educated, not. These things matter. They all have their financial solutions. Some are more scalable than others. Be precise. The second is be realistic in what you ask, also from people that you finance or from your fund managers like us. On the side here, you see the way we're currently managing actually the Dutch Good Growth Fund. Actually, when we participated in the tender that ultimately we won, we actually questioned whether it was feasible, because we saw there was actually quite a Christmas tree full of political wishes, and we had to be extremely impactful. We had to be extremely catalytic, attract private funding at the same time. We had to be revolving, et cetera, et cetera. So if you want to be very additional, and look at the Zambia example, accept that you will be less revolving, and it will be very difficult and will take years, and maybe it will never happen before you start attracting private commercial capital. So make sure that you have that clear. One way how we manage actually DGF is that we manage it on a portfolio level. So all our investments have to meet the minimum requirements in terms of impact, in terms of being catalytic and the revolvingness. But some are more revolving than others. Others are more additional than others. And through balancing it out on the portfolio level, we achieve all the objectives. But on a single deal, we're not asking the impossible of our counterparties. And lastly, be proactive. I think finding inequality is a verb. It's something that you need to do actively. It's not something that you just put in a document, but you have to really mainstream it in your whole investment process, from asset selection to structuring your deal, to subsequent your monitoring, your exiting if you have done an equity transaction, and your reporting. So that's it from my side. A lot of information. I hope it made sense, and very happy to get your questions. If things are not being answered today, then feel free to reach out to me on this email.
Thank you very much, Marnix. Extremely interesting presentation. In the world of finance, how you're contributing to structuring that world of finance. With your words of caution that you made at the end, and how do you get private commercial finance coming in, which is quite different from what you're doing, obviously. So thank you very much. And that's a nice transition because of the structuring and of the legal and regulatory framework. Nice transition to Diego presentation, who will take us to the investment climate reform facility. And we'll learn more about that and how can that help also structure decent work, employment creations, better practices, and better finance to support that. Diego, over to you.
Thank you, Jérôme. Let me put this on full screen. Great. Well, hello everyone. Very happy to be here with all of you, and of course to learn from each other. It's been a very interesting week for cross learning, cross pollination. I'm Diego Borrero. I'm the technical lead for business environment reform at the ICR facility, which is a Team Europe initiative that, as you can see, is co-funded by the European Union, the OACPS, the German Ministry of Cooperation and Development, and the British Council. Just to tell you a little bit of our work and our goal. Well, our goal is pretty simple. Our goal is to support the improvement of the investment climate in African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries through targeted interventions. A few characteristics that actually differentiate our work of the facility are, I would say, three. The first one is that we are an on-demand facility. So we respond to specific needs, specific requests via targeted solutions that we provide via technical assistance. Second, we work with both the public sector and the private sector. We work with traditional beneficiaries such as ministries of commerce, of finance, and other policymakers, but we also work directly with private sector organizations such as business associations, employers associations, chambers of commerce, and so on. And third, the characteristic is that we put actually a huge focus on promoting women's economic empowerment and inclusion to our work. Actually, just looking at our pipeline when I was preparing this presentation, we found that more than 60% of our interventions last year were either gender sensitive or gender focused. So just one little detail, ICR is implemented through three components, but for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to focus on our on-demand technical assistance component. So how do we tackle the business environment? We do this through three angles. The first angle is BE, Business Environment Reform, BER. So what do we do here? We help our partners to reform the different functional areas of the business environment, functional areas such as business registration, insolvency, access to finance, property registration, etc. All the areas that actually affect the life cycle of an entrepreneur. The reforms that we support can be cross-sectoral or horizontal. For example, the work that we are doing right now in Djibouti, where we are supporting the reform of the investment code of the country, or this reform can be industry-specific, like what we did recently in Benin, where we are tackling, assessing which are the barriers affecting a specific sector, in this case of Benin, the apiculture sector. What are these barriers affecting the business environment of a specific sector? The second angle is business environment sustainability. Of course, environmental sustainability and social sustainability. So what do we mean by business environment for sustainability and for social sustainability for the purpose of this talk? It means how we can make the business environment more inclusive towards women, towards youth, towards people with disabilities, towards the bottom of the pyramid. And in that area, we have a pretty active pipeline. For example, supporting associations of social enterprises in countries like Kenya, Jamaica, Ethiopia, or Ghana, where we are supporting them to better advocate for well-functioning regulations for them. Then finally, our third angle is public-private dialogue. And this is also an important angle for the purpose of promoting inclusiveness and fighting inequalities. PPD is a crucial component of our work, not only because we support the development of PPD structures to make reforms bottom-up and inclusive, but also because we foster this dialogue through our interventions so that the policies and the reforms that we promote are actually fed by those that are typically marginalized from those discussions and ultimately from those decisions. So we can say that, of course, although we cannot claim that 100% causality of our work reduces inequalities, we can confidently say that because there is a strong link between inequalities and exclusion, our work contributes to that ultimate goal. Through all the phases of our interventions, from assessment, let's remember that we are an on-demand facility, from assessment of our request to the implementation, we put big efforts into collecting the data about marginalized stakeholders, in giving them a voice in PPD processes, and of course, in making sure that their input is considered in policy making. For example, our work in Côte d'Ivoire is strengthening, for example, the capacity of small and micro entrepreneurs to have their voices heard in the policy dialogue. Actually, last week, I had a conversation with the head of the SME Association of Côte d'Ivoire, and she said, this intervention has in the capacity that you have created have actually really be a big change for us, because we used to be invited to fora, PPD fora, just to fill out, to sign the attendance sheet. And now they're actually trained to better advocate for their sorry, there is some noise. All right, thank you. Now they're very prepared for that. And they actually recently submitted a package of reforms to the Ministry of Finance, and one of those has been accepted. Another example is in Kenya, we have improved the capacities of the Clean Cooking Association of Kenya to actually better include women and youth in their public-private dialogue processes and the decisions that they want the government to take regarding their sector. So, I already said this, yeah. So, Now, as Beata and Jerome mentioned, I'm going to focus a little bit on one of our interventions. That is the case of Kigali in Rwanda. Why is this an interesting case? Well, typically the literature and the narrative on investment climate reform is about fighting informality, fighting it through formalization. And one of the main objectives of investment climate reform is indeed to enable the conditions so that this informal can become formal. Beata mentioned the importance of this transition from an informal economy to a formal economy, which is of course good for all, for entrepreneurs and workers, because it enables safer jobs, safer operation, and actually by being formal, these entrepreneurs can better access credit and services. And of course, it's important for the state because of the same reasons, plus you increase the tax basis. So of course, formalization is a goal, but in this case of Kigali, we approach it differently. So more than half of the total workforce of Kigali is informal. Actually, some estimations point even towards 80% of informality. So there are national and municipal policies aiming at private sector development and, of course, post-COVID recovery of the economy. But in most cases, these policies are not accessible to informal workers. So when we started to work with the municipality, we identified that there is a critical lack of information and a lack of data, actually, to characterize the informal workers and the informal sector. So without this data, policies to support informal workers, informal economic agents, this cannot be effective. And we can even less think about efforts for formalization, which that's an ultimate step. So one of the key components of this intervention, and of course, the resulting contribution of ICR to the city's resilience plan, was actually to characterize informal sectors and help the city better understand the informal sectors that circulate and operate in Kigali. So, of course, we had to be targeted. So we selected a number of informal sectors based on criteria such as vulnerability, proportion of women and youth, and of course, size. So some of the sectors that we studied and we collected through we connected the data through this intervention, this critical data for the municipality. Some were, for example, the Agaseke workers, which are this typical Rwandan basket. So which are pretty beautiful and very liked by tourists. And there is a huge proportion of women producing and selling this. So although these workers were actually organized in the past in cooperatives, these actually failed. Most of them collapsed during COVID, and their businesses collapsed during COVID due to the restrictions, due to the collapse of tourism. Street vendors was another sector. Street vendors, as some of you may know, they're completely banned in the streets in Rwanda. So, but still, thousands of them operate in the city. So thousands of them have this as their main mean for subsistence. And thousands of them just operate in vulnerable conditions around the city. So one of the key challenges identified is actually the lack of stable places to trade for these street vendors, which of course poses economic challenges, but also other challenges such as sexual harassment towards women in this sector. Another sector were waste pickers, another was young construction workers, which are respected professions, but again without contracts, with no health insurance, with little opportunities to get certified so that they can be better paid. So there were a lot of challenges that we found and that we share with the municipality through this, as well as the recommendations. So you can later look at the report itself. It's actually on our website, icr-facility.eu. But the recommendations from these interventions were shared with the mayor of Kigali and his team, and are now in the cities. They're now part of the resilience plans of the city, including, for example, the creation of an informal economy task force, which will actually encompass different departments that previously were uncoordinated. And the task is to follow up on the recommendations from ICR. So some of the recommendations also pointed at reducing the vulnerability of the operators. For example, supporting the creation of safe spaces for them to operate. And this is actually one of the main results with this intervention. We ended it last year, and we are starting to see some of the results of this intervention. Of course, it's a long-term plan, and we look forward to see more. But actually, based on the recommendations of the intervention, of the ICR intervention, and based on a better understanding of street vendors, the city has actually taken action and has identified some areas, 9 areas actually in the city, to become micro markets for these street vendors. And this is very important because there is already one that is functional already. And in these areas, the street vendors can safely operate without the problems of being persecuted or harassed. Furthermore, the intervention has created a bridge for dialogue, previously, I would say, non-existent. And this is very important when we're trying to tackle informality, because there's typically a broken dialogue between the public and the private sector. So, some of the lessons learned from these interventions, as you can tell, poverty agendas typically skirt around informal work, and it's actually important to demystify and to decriminalize informality so that policymakers are able to tackle it and to reach that ultimate goal of a formal economy. And this is even more important when you're dealing with most of your workforce, in this case, 60, 70%. Formalization agenda needs a shift in paradigm from regulatory control to positive enabling. For example, prioritizing the needs of the workers and understanding them, raising data. Dialogue is key as well. And then finally, I would say that tackling informal sectors such as the ones that we saw in this intervention are also a huge opportunity for job-rich growth. For example, we get huge potential to strengthen circular and green economies. Just to finalize, a few conclusions which are broader. That is one of the pictures of the discussion labs that we had, the different sectors. Traditionally, investment climate initiatives don't have inequalities reduction as a goal, as an immediate goal, but they actually can do more to contribute to tackle it. And actually, a better investment climate can help reducing inequalities if the program is designed and implemented with that in mind from inception. How? By capturing in the analytic stage and in the implementation, what are the needs of those that are typically excluded. The programs supporting investment climate have a strong potential, and we can play a very important role as honest third-party brokers, particularly, as I mentioned, in cases when there is a broken dialogue between the informal and the policymaker. So, and finally, PPD and inclusive participatory processes for policymaking are a win-win for government, for businesses, for citizens, but only if they are truly inclusive. If they only represent the voices of the big fishes or the most vocal ones dominate the dialogue, they fail. They need to be inclusive and they need to be designed for that. And we also have a huge role to play into that improvement of PPD processes. And that's it. I will stop there. Thank you so much for your attention. Happy to answer some questions or to further chair.
Thank you so much, Diego, for this presentation and sharing with us all of your experience and expertise on that. So we should now shift to our Q&A session. I will share my screen and open up the questions that are already on display. But before maybe I do that, may I ask you to rejoin us in the plenary and switch on your cameras so that we can all see each other as we talk to each other. I would like also to draw your attentions. I guess you've taken a lot of notes and you know that you have online with this platform access to the information that's been shared. You will be able to find it here in the resource section. So there'll be more presentations coming up and the links being requested. So you'll be able to find all of the information here. On your questions, I will let our colleagues, the guest presenters, read the questions just a minute so that they can answer with time. Just before that, I would like to perhaps put out a few words on what we've heard today, Beata. First, I think there was clear evidence that was given in the three presentations in terms of the intersectionality of the issue. So inequalities can be tackled through employment creation and decent work. That means working on trade policy, but that also means working on gender, on finance, on social protection, and through the legal and regulatory framework. I think there was evidence given to us that if you work on those aspects, you can improve issues at household level, health status, tax and revenue collection. You can improve, you can work with urban development to create a safe space where to work. So I think there was a number of elements presented to us here. Also, I would like to remind perhaps colleagues, there was a clear case made by Diego, but also by Marnix on the importance of data and using data to understand the context carefully and have a precise response to that so they can better structure your work. We've heard that we could use training and capacity development. We could use policy dialogue, social dialogue, and voices so that we're creating the space for making policies work for the marginalized. And obviously, we could use finance and how finance could structure specific finance mechanisms to support gender marginalized or the poorest to access to new work and business opportunities. With that, perhaps attempt to make a little bit of a thread between these presentations, I'd like to ask our colleagues, the guest speakers, perhaps to address the two questions being presented, and then ask the audience to raise questions.
Yeah. Maybe the first question, thank you for this summary, excellent summary. I wanted also very much highlight that we all, I think, insisted very much on the dialogue, the importance of dialogue, social dialogue, public dialogue. And also I like very much this, it was highlighted by Marnix and Diego, that we have to be proactive, that really it will not go by itself, that really an effort from our side to focus on those who normally do not have voice, and therefore their interests are forgotten, that we have to be really proactive in order to look for them and to really focus on them. It requires effort, a special effort. I don't know. I can see this question on the recurrent on balancing time for workers' training with working hours in a way that does not create disruption on work. I think that's it's rather a question for Nabila for the GIR training. Would you like, Nabila, to answer this one?
Yes, of course. Yeah. Thank you for the question. It is indeed a recurring question we get all the time from the factories and the workers. And along the way, what we have realized is there is no alternative to being very transparent about it, that the factories and the management, once they sign up for a program, like a training program, like GIR, in the case of GIR, they have to allow time for the workers, which means that the trainees who are selected on this career progression path to become a supervisor, they will start trialing as a trainee supervisor as well. So they're no longer doing the work of operators. So factories need to make alternative arrangements, which is maybe have I don't know, substitute workers, and different factories come up with different plans. But this is something that we discuss in advance of the program, and really explaining it to them that this is an investment from your side as well. And part of the investment is, you know, supporting these trainees and making sure that they're not double burdened and that they can clearly focus on the new role in the training and the progression. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is also a question, rather, I think for us, I mean, for INTPA, is there any example on FSD Plus application to promotion of decent work in main value chains, especially agriculture? I must say that I'm not able to provide any example, but yeah, there is my colleague Miguel Llopis Campo is with me. Maybe you know Miguel and some examples.
Yes, I mean, so hi, can you hear me?
Hi.
We can hear you very well. Go ahead, please.
Perfect. No, yeah. So I think that the question, let's say cannot be answered, and let me explain why it cannot be answered. Because you don't use a financial instrument to change the work conditions, because this is not how you're going to deploy that instrument. If it's a guarantee, the answer is no, because the guarantees basically are based on a portfolio of investments. So it's very difficult to put it as a precondition. But even if it's not a guarantee, if it's a blended finance, and for example, is a direct loan to a bank, the bank in itself also works on a portfolio basis. So it would be the bank, the local bank, who would need to guarantee the decent work conditions of whoever is receiving the lending. So the way an EFSD product functions in general terms is that we give the guarantee to a DFI. The DFI provides the guarantee to an investment fund or to a local bank. And those local banks or those investment funds will be the one needing to make sure that whoever is receiving, it's also compliant with decent job. So it's not impossible, but it is a very difficult target. However, at the same time, DFIs have their own standards, and DFIs do promote sustainable environment practices, do promote decent job, do promote those kind of standards. So it's more a question about how DFIs themselves, with or without our guarantees, or with or without our blended finance, are also aligning these kind of objectives, and therefore, as much as possible, they will always try to push this. But what my point was, I wouldn't think that's the best tool that we have to promote specifically decent work. But I would say that if you want to use a tool to promote decent work, for sure it would be a blended finance product, not a guarantee. And it would need to be a very specific blended finance product targeting very specific type of intermediary organizations, which means basically commercial banks or investment funds that are very much already aligned with this principle, and that you're channeling the funding to strengthen their capacity to influence and to reach businesses that can be somehow influenced to change their labor practices. But again, I mean, I think of all the in our toolbox, it wouldn't be the tool that I would choose first to try to achieve this kind of goal. I think, Beta, there's another question also on the formalization and access to finance. Should I already answer that one too?
Please go ahead.
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, because I mean that's another interesting point, because we did try to do a program like this with UNDP, trying to combine. Basically, the idea was if you could group small businesses into structures such as cooperatives that would allow them to access more and better finance, and that could become an incentive to formalization. And basically, on this specific project, at the end we couldn't do it for a number of reasons. But also, I think we have to see this the other way around. I mean, the issue that we have now in Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, is that the level of informality is huge, and in reality, what's happening is that informality quite often is a constraint on access to finance. So if what we're trying to promote and support is small businesses, micro businesses, entrepreneurs, if we put formalization as a condition, basically we're excluding them even more from the market. And we would be doing indirectly, even if it's not our intention, is increasing the amount of financing that is going to more stable, consolidated businesses. So I think we have to separate those two problems. I think one thing is the informality, which of course is something that we are absolutely aligned to try to change and to work through different instruments to try to change it. But I wouldn't. I mean, my recommendation, I would never link our financial products to that, because that in reality would create more inequalities than equalities, because we would even exclude even more those people that are already excluded from the market, except with products such as the ones Marmik was presenting. No? So if it's doable, potentially it's doable, but I think it would be counterproductive.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
May I contribute to that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay?
I wanted to ask other guest speakers to contribute if they want. Yes, please go ahead.
No, I'm fully aligned with Nigel, and actually we did a study in the Uganda on the entrepreneurial ecosystem, understanding what are the key challenges and obstacles for growth. And actually it turned out that tax regulation in that setting is extremely restrictive. So if you really want to promote formalization, look at your tax system rather than your finance system. That would be my suggestion.
Okay. Thank you. And somebody else? I mean, Diego, do you want to add something on this, or we go to other questions?
Yeah, I think that of course being informal is one of the key challenges to access to finance, and that should be an incentive for SMEs, because it's not only the fact of being informal, but the fact of not receiving the right support that could be provided by different entities. So I think it's a chicken and the egg situation. Although I must add as well that there are some interesting examples, I think, in the Dominican Republic, actually. The IDB, Inter-American Development Bank, and Harvard University, they were, for example, testing different ways to provide finance to informal operators, because they were outside of the loop of formality. They were, of course, also outside of the loop of credit bureaus, etc. So there are some interesting ways, for example, to provide credit to these people which are in this transitory, hopefully, state, with different tools. For example, these tools were, for example, behavioral tools, trying to analyze the profile of the person and their capacity to repay based on other criteria than whatever they could own. And again, I want to stress that informality turning the informal into formal is a huge debt for humanity. If you remember Hernando de Soto, the Peruvian economist, he said that there is a hidden, I think, I don't know how many trillions of dollars hidden, not hidden, but not active, that could be active from this informal economy, and the impact on the world economy could be huge.
Thank you. We have more questions with some likes here. So questions about how do we use, I mean, you mentioned Puesta de Diálogo, capacity development, finance. Obviously, there's a question on budget support coming up, and what can budget support do to impact on employment creation and decent work, or the finance framework, or in fact, tax. And then there's one about this new due diligence legislation, and whether the incidence of it would be on EU firms or on the low-skilled workers or less skilled workers in the beneficiary countries.
Yeah, maybe I can try to answer this one on due diligence legislation. Of course, this one is the risk that we are aware of. In fact, that all the burden on due diligence will be supported, will fall on the supply chains in the supplying countries, so on unskilled workers or on the businesses in the supplying countries. And also another risk that we see and that we want to counteract against it is the withdrawal of EU companies if they see a lot of risks, if they see that can really do not ensure the due diligence, instead of trying to, with their partners, the economic partners, business partners, to improve the situation, they will withdraw. So those are the two main risks that we see, and in fact we developed a kind of approach of accompanying measures. We mapped all the initiatives, programs, projects that aimed at helping the companies in supplying countries, or in our partner countries, to improve, to develop, to thrive through the private sector support, and through other instruments, also the better for a better application of labor standards. And if I may show still my presentation, do you want to show? Yeah, I would like to show my slides, because I had not this one. Yes, this one, and maybe this slide, please. If we can show this slide. Here we have this package, the entire package. Okay, it goes one by one. Of the accompanying measures. When we did the mapping last year, we ended up with more than 100 different programs, projects. We categorized them into 8 categories. Some of them are not really programs that are global policy dialogue with international, ensuring international coordination and research with OECD, with ILO, on the G7, G20. But others are really our traditional development aid projects, like for example this category on producer supplier capacity building and empowerment, with Better Work program that was presented today, another Vision Zero Fund, etc. Switch to green also can be considered as accompanying measures. Then we have a support to industry collaboration and stakeholder engagement. We have the support to regulatory environment and support ecosystem in partner countries. Or with development of practical tools for the stakeholders of a given value chain. So we developed, I think, a comprehensive, a very broad package of instruments, of tools that we will continue developing, promoting, implementing at the global level. So here from headquarters, but also working with the EU, with other colleagues responsible for regional programs in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, but also with EU delegations in order to then apply those tools, those different accompanying measures, depending really on the situation in the ground. So I hope I answered this question. I can see that Miguel has wants to add something.
No, I just wanted to complement what you just said, Beth. I mean, absolutely, and not only that. I mean, we have done a couple of studies, one in Guatemala, for example, on the impact of the due diligence regulation, but also the deforestation regulation on smallholders, because we indeed foresee that this is something that is there, that we need to prepare ourselves. And unfortunately, in our unit, we don't have enough resources to cover all delegations, but we're more than happy to share the methodology and how this study was done, because I do think delegations need to start looking at this already now and doing similar studies at the country level to start defining, okay, what are going to be the impact, not only of the due diligence, also CBAM and deforestation, and start thinking how we can deploy our tools to try to mitigate, as Beata was saying, with these accompanying measures. And we're also, one of the projects that Beata was showing is this project with ITC, where we have also limited resources, but basically we're testing a bit already some ideas there. But this will be needed. I mean, this will need to be done mostly at the delegation level, because that's where these things are going to happen. But what we can surely do is help share with anyone who's interested the methodology, the approach that we've been done in the countries. We've done it already with one of our instruments. And support you in the process to do your own study at the country level and start foreseeing how we are going to tackle this, because this is coming, and the question is how much is going to impact, but that is going to be impact. It is going to be impact somehow, this small producers. So we have to be ready to support them in different ways, including policy discussion and regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Miguel.
Thank you.
Who wants to take questions on what can the EU do to use its leverage, and also perhaps budget support to promote decent work and employment creation? Maybe I don't know if it's Diego or
it's rather, I think, for me, of course, happy if Diego can wants to contribute. Maybe for the leverage, I think that we see as a trade as a big leverage, and by the way, the due diligence is also related to trade, of course, because it's the trade relationship between the suppliers, the businesses in supplying countries, and our businesses that invest or that buy products in the supplying countries. So trade, and through trade instruments like I mentioned, free trade agreements and GSP, General Scheme of Preferences, we with the countries where we have those arrangements, those agreements, we introduce some conditions. We introduce the sustainable development chapters, where we require, I mean, we expect from those countries, if they want to keep the free access to our market, to the EU market, we expect them to really ratify first and apply the fundamental labor conventions. And then in addition, we provide really support in order to help them to revise their legislation if necessary, and then after to enforce this legislation. For this, I must say that we work a lot with International Labour Organization. At the global level, we have this project Trade for Decent Work, but not only, even Better Work, for example, project, and we support Better Work in Vietnam. As you may know, the EU signed a free trade agreement with Vietnam in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, or 21. And there is this chapter, and also Vietnam committed to revise, to align its labor legislation to the international conventions. And Better Work staff, I mean ILO, which is in fact ILO staff, also helped in this area. The Vietnamese government to really do it in an adequate way. One good example also is Uzbekistan. where really thanks to GSP Plus and to the really support through technical assistance, we managed, the country managed really to substantially decrease the number of children in labor. So really this problem almost disappeared in Uzbekistan. So I think this is very good leverage, and we hope that really the positive outcomes of this due diligence legislation will prevail the negative ones that may happen. And for budget support, maybe I cannot provide an example concretely, but in the resources there is a manual on employment, in how to promote employment and decent work in the EU development cooperation, and there are chapters on how to use budget support for this purpose. So there are always also some examples. So really, please use this manual, because I think a lot of useful information is there. I don't know if some guest speaker want to add something on those topics of leverage, especially.
No, not yet. Unless there's any other questions, I still do have some questions myself to ask.
Yeah.
Especially with regards to the local content legislation, for those who have encountered those, and what we can do to use those legislation to create more business opportunities and employment opportunities. But maybe that's a wider field than we can tackle today. Last word, Beata, perhaps extend our thanks to our guest speakers.
Yes.
And to the participants who joined us this morning.
Yes, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you to guest speakers for your participation and really great presentations. I think they were very to the point. Of course, as I said at the beginning, we are in discussion to really fine-tune our approach to reduction of inequalities through our thematic area. So I think that we can make this discussion with also colleagues from EU delegations that work on these aspects. Feel free to reach out to us in order to further discuss. Also, I will. There was one question regarding this my slide that I didn't present, missing jobs. I think because we find sometimes ago a very interesting article, so I will ask the colleagues to add this article to the resources. It's published on the capacity for deaf, so it's available there, and really it focuses on the idea that in fact the first in our thematic area, the first issue is really create jobs. Because when we focus on the quality of jobs, where there are no jobs, where the economy does not create jobs and a local economy, or when we focus on TVET, on vocational education training, but there are no jobs for the people who receive this training, this is really counterproductive. Really, the first focus should be on creating an enabling environment for companies, for businesses to be created and to create jobs. And then we should also accompany this process with the focus on job quality and on skills, on upskilling the people, but only when there are opportunities. So this is more or less the main message from this interesting article. It's just an article. A point of view, so I will put it in resources so you can easily find it. So thank you again. Thank you, Jérôme, for the facilitation. Thank you, G4, for organizing that this session and inviting us. Again, thank you very much for guest speakers and Miguel to supporting me in this exercise.
Goodbye.